Hello, hello. Welcome to Friday Office Hour. I hope everybody's doing well. Hello to everyone on YouTube. Hello to everyone on Twitter. Once again, this is Under the Hood. This is an online community where aspiring, current, or retired STEM students and professionals can get together and talk about some of the behind the scenes experiences of having a career in STEM, and also friends and family of STEM folk can come and listen in on what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So thank you all for being here. I'll do a few disclaimers and best practices and housekeeping. Well, this in this space, you can actually remain relatively anonymous, unless your username has your real name. So other than that, I don't know who you are. When you comment in the live stream, I don't know who hits the thumbs up button. And if your subscriptions are private, I don't know who is subscribed. And so what this does is help to maintain a little bit of anonymity in case you have a sensitive issue and you just need some advisement without revealing who you are. If you are watching on Twitter, just know that I can't see you. And I'm happy to have you engaged here in StreamYard, but if you can't, that is totally fine. All right, one more disclaimer. This community does not handle Title IX concerns directly. I recommend that if you are experiencing a challenge in relation to Title IX, that you visit the appropriate office on your campus. I am covered under Title IX with the work and engagement that I do on this platform. So I prefer that you would go through the channels on your campus, at your school, etc. Alrighty. So I'm excited to be here today because I'm going to be addressing something that comes up kind of haphazardly, but we really don't pay much attention to it sometimes. And that is the management of your files, which can really make or break your day-to-day operations. And I'm going to touch on technology and my recommendations for computers. So I'm going to go ahead and then later on, I'll answer the questions that came through the form. Okay. So let's get into it. Today, once again, we're talking about technology and file management. And so I'd like to give a shout out to the website Pexels. Okay, I actually learned of this website from a Twitter thread. So thank you to the Twitter person. I will link that thread in the description box. And it's a thread about like free resources, free technological resources. And Pexels is one of those websites. And so all of the graphics that you see in this presentation are stock images from Pexels, which is super helpful for developing web content. Thank you, Pexels. This is not advertisement. I'm not sponsored by Pexels. All right. So the first thing I'll discuss is Mac versus Windows operating systems. All right. For you tech people, please don't like come after me, but this is just based on my experience. In regard to whether or not you should purchase a Mac or a Windows computer, it depends on what your research is and what you're expected to do day to day. By training, I am a computational modeler. So I like to invest in a computer that's going to make my life easier when I'm doing my research. So different operating systems are good for different purposes. So let's talk about Mac. So when it comes to my personal laptop, my at-home desktop, I prefer to use the Mac operating system for a number of reasons. This live stream is being filmed on a Mac desktop, and I have a laptop. First of all, user experience. I switched over to Mac for my personal laptop in 2009, and it's just been great ever since. The graphics are clean, the handling and the technology is pretty nimble to me. So literally, for you people with a trackpad, you can do everything pretty much like this. It's almost like I don't know what this is, but I can move windows, shift through screens, and do a lot of things without a whole lot of strain on my wrist. So I really like the MacBook Pro, specifically the 13-inch. It's big enough for me to see my files, and it's not as big as a 15-inch, or I don't even know if the 15-inch is still in production, but that's my preference for my personal laptop. So the interface, I kind of touched on that with user experience. So the interface is really nice. I'll talk about displays in a minute, but the colors, the graphics, the displays, the brightness, I find it to be really helpful. I have a bullet for vertical integration. So this is in regard to Mac manufacturing software, all the components of a personal computer, software, hardware, the business, the technical support, all that comes from the same company. So, which is Apple, which I find makes it easy for me to get the computer fixed, troubleshoot, make purchases. If I have an issue, I'm going to the Apple store. I'm not going to a bunch of different stores to fix this and that, and there's not, I'm only dealing with one vendor, right, for everything. This is not an advertisement for Mac or Windows. So yeah, I'm not getting paid for this. Product lifetime. I used to be a Windows personal computer user, but what I'm finding is that the Mac laptops just last longer. I can get a good solid 5 years out of my laptop with relatively little issues, unless I'm being super rough, like banging too hard on my keyboard, spilling coffee on my computer, things like that. The technology can last, within reason, up to 5 years. And I say 5 years because the software turnover and the development changes in a way that makes your 5-year-old system obsolete, right? So make sure to recycle the computer, or when you're done with it, or what I tend to do is wipe the hard drive and give it to a little cousin so that they can use the laptop. Definitely put your older laptop, if you're in a field that needs to be at the forefront of technology. If you're a computational modeler, make sure that you send your old machine through a recycling program or gift it to someone who is in need. Security. So I got into a conversation with a Windows user recently about antivirus software, and I just simply haven't had to deal with that with a Mac. Since I moved over from Windows to Mac. From what I understand, there is just built-in security with the Mac operating system that makes you a little bit less vulnerable to software bugs and other types of identity theft. You have to be careful about identity theft, but I just haven't had those types of issues with Mac. The next bullet is all-in-one-ish. So I think that Mac laptops and desktops are relatively like all in one. The camera, so you don't have to have an external camera with the Mac devices. Like right now, I am streaming with the built-in camera on the Mac desktop. The clarity is pretty good. Um, also, yeah, so the audio is pretty good as well. I am not using the built-in mic. I do have an external mic to make sure that the audio is good. You can see that right there. But for the most part, you don't have to buy a bunch of extensions. However, everyone knows that with Mac, you do have to buy extensions for and adapters for additional USB ports if needed, Ethernet ports, HDMI ports if they're not included. And so that's why I say it's all in one ish. You have to make purchases from that company for the adapters to add some of the functionality back to the laptop that was lost over the last 5 to 10 years. So the things that are built in are important for me, like the camera, like that's really important for me. But I don't mind buying an additional port, a USB port, if it means the computer is lighter and faster. Now, so that's for my personal use. Now, when it comes to those of you that do the majority of your work in the lab on campus, and for those of you that are actually running your own lab, I recommend purchasing Windows machines for your actual day-to-day operations on campus. Number one, I just find that troubleshooting, uh, like internet stuff, is easier with the Windows operating system. The campus just seems to, like, in a couple instances, the campus has had enterprise accounts. Either campus that I've worked at, they've had accounts with like Windows OS vendors that makes the products a little bit cheaper for you to purchase through your university procurement system. Also, software compatibility. So, for those of us that are in specialized fields that require software that is developed specifically for our purposes, usually there's only the Windows version of that software, which is it's a little bit inconvenient, but at least for your students and staff, even if they have a personal laptop that they use that's running Windows operating system, I'm sorry, Mac operating system, at least they can come to work and use their desktop for the software that is only compatible with Windows. Also, we're trained on Windows machines, at least my generation was, so it kind of makes it simpler to get certain things done on your Windows machine. Now, some of you that are advanced, you can actually split your hard drive partition to run both Windows and Mac. But since I prefer to have more of my hard drive be used for file storage, I don't do a split partition. I don't partition my hard drive for two operating systems, but I know people that do that. Now, the other thing is you have to check with your campus, but you can actually use remote desktop software if you have either of the operating systems and you need to access the other. Typically, this is true for those with a personal computer that runs Mac operating system, but you need to run some Windows only software. In that case, you'd install remote desktop on your Mac operating system and use the Windows machine virtually. That's what I did in grad school. and it was protected by a virtual private network that was hosted by the Georgia Tech information technology people. And so security was really tight, and they allowed it. But for some campuses like Berkeley, remote desktop connection is really not allowed because of the vulnerabilities to attack. The other thing is, I find that overall the Windows machines are a little bit less expensive for the same technology by maybe 10 to 20%. Uh, and I am comparing desktops to laptops. So if I wanted a comparable Mac laptop versus a Windows desktop, they're going to run about the same price for the specifications that I'm going to tell you. But you tech folks, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just my experience. So right now, the lab that you see in episode 8 of Under the Hood, the student and research staff office, all of the workstations have a Windows machine. All right. The next thing I'm going to talk about is technical specifications. And so I get a lot of questions about, like, what do I need for my new computer? I'm trying to buy a new computer. What should I be on the lookout for? Well, these are like my 4 benchmarks that I use to make my decisions about technology. And this set of specs usually is not available in stock. You do have to pre-order this. So I prefer to have at least 1 terabyte of local storage. I prefer that. That's not always possible. This is about enough to get you through now this is for environmental engineering research. So for those of you that are handling massive data sets like with telecommunications, this is probably not for you. But also people are using the cloud. All right. So I am not a fan of the cloud. I like to store my things locally. So 1 terabyte, I don't think I've ever exceeded that capacity on a local machine, but it should take you through your graduate research and your postdoctoral research. So as far as RAM, RAM or random access memory is part of the technical specification that allows your machine to run fairly quickly if you have a lot of processes running. So I'm the type of person that has Google Chrome running with 4 windows and 50 tabs in each window, Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint. I'm running all kinds of stuff at once, which requires a lot of RAM. And so 16 gigs has served me well. 16 gigs is not always available in stock in this combination. So if you really need that, you may want to pre-order ahead of time. And just circling back to storage, for those of you that really need a computer really, really quickly and you don't have time to pre-order, go ahead and get the standard storage, which is like 256 gigs, and you can use an external hard drive. So you can expand your hard drive later. That's a little bit out of my purview, but I know students that do that. So for those of you that really, really need a machine because you just spilled some water on yours and you need your machine right away, but the specs aren't there, you can think about investing in an external hard drive. Processor. So the processor also determines how fast your computer runs. And so my preference is an i7, which is Intel and above. I can't always have access to that if I need to buy a machine right away. So I'm usually running an i5 processor, and that's available on Windows and Mac operating systems. But Apple has transitioned to their new processing chip called M1. The machine I'm on right now has an M1 chip. I don't have opinions about this chip, but for those of you that are just dead set on having a Windows machine, an i7 processor has served me well from grad school all throughout my time as a faculty member. Displays. I think displays are important for me. Is it critical? No, I'm not a gamer, but I do like Mac's display, and so that the quality of your display will be dependent on the graphics card, and so the better you want your display to be, the better your graphics card needs to be. So most Apple products have a built-in retina display that's meant to mimic what your eye sees, and it's beautiful. This display is very dynamic. The colors are vivid, and I really like this display, and it just makes the user experience really nice. So, like I said, these technical specifications are hardly ever available in stock in this combination. So sometimes I give up my RAM and sometimes I give up my processor. But if I can tell you anything to prioritize here, it's the RAM. It's the RAM because Chrome is really memory intensive. So I think you can get around the other stuff. If anyone else has other preferences, you can let me know in the chat. Okay. All right. So moving on from technology and moving forward into file management. Okay. It's one of those meta things that we don't talk about that I think is really important. I have received more than one comment about how people think I'm organized. Because I share my screen a lot and they see me navigating through my folders. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But honestly, it's my file system that helps me to manage day to day. So right there, I only have one word of advice, and that's just create more folders. I think that can really help. I'm showing you here, this is the main folder for what I call UC Berkeley. For those of you that don't know, I am a professor at UC Berkeley. And I'm being very transparent here about how I have organized like the things that I think are important to separate. And so you can see that I have a folder for like ACML marketing. ACML is my research group. So anything related to our webpage, our Instagram, our like group photos, anything that is meant to be outward facing to the public goes in ACML marketing. Awards. So this is like Talented 12 and like monetary awards that aren't associated with a research contract. So I've got conferences, I separate those out, and within conferences, I'll have each conference that I go to as a subfolder. So anything associated with that, the travel, my abstracts, the actual research presentation, all that stuff goes into conferences. Department administration. So anything related to like what goes in department admin? Announcements that I need to reread. If we need to review a candidate, anything related to things that I have to report back to the chair or department level like decisions, that goes in department admin. And I usually have a campus administration folder as well. So what I find is that it's good to separate the different institutional levels and the communications and documents that are associated with those different levels. I'm not going to go through all of these. Employee, like anything related to my insurance, UC Path, for those of you that know UC Path is going in employee. URSO is our engineering research office. So it's not stuff related to my grants, but it's the administration and the communications that I need to save that relate to our Engineering Research Services Office. Funded projects, I'll talk about that later. Group meetings, headshots, invited talks, lab, so safety training for the lab, purchases for the lab. Well, not purchases, but laboratory management will go in there. I have a folder for merit and promotion. Okay. You can go, I don't have a video specifically about merit and promotion because I haven't been promoted. But merits I've gone through. And so anything related to my file, supporting documents, letters will go in merit and promotion. Papers, those are the papers that I'm working on as a co-author or a lead author or supporting my students. Peer review are papers that I'm reviewing, as well as any panel reviews that I'm serving on will go under peer review. Professional development, that speaks for itself. Proposals, okay, and I'll show you how I break down proposals in just a minute. Obviously purchases, and I actually have that subdivided as office supplies, research equipment. And so it's kind of segregated by how the purchases are organized in procurement. So supplies and equipment are different. Supplies are any items that the unit cost is less than $5,000 is usually considered supplies, and everything else is equipment. Supplies are not inventory, but equipment are inventory. So I like to separate out those purchases. And it helps when they come back around to ask me about inventory. And it also helps when, it just helps when I pass the code off to a colleague who's like, okay, how much did you pay for this? How much should I budget for this? Obviously reimbursements. Research members, I have a file for every one of my staff members to keep their letters and their support letters and all that stuff segregated. Service work speaks for itself. Student exams. So a lot of us sit on dissertation committees, oral qualifying exam committees, and you think you don't need to keep up with that, but you actually have to enumerate those things in your merit and promotion file. So I try to, while I don't always download their dissertations, I usually read those online. And I use my email storage for that. I will download any paperwork that I've signed for them, anything that I've physically edited for them. Teaching speaks for itself. I have a slide for how I organize my teaching. I have something called UCB letterhead. So, I like to keep that in the parent directory so that if I have to write letters, I can just go and get it. WFC is the Women's Faculty Club, and obviously workshops speak for itself. So I've separated out workshops because it's a whole different kind of beast to me. You can drop in the comment if you have anything else you'd add to this parent folder for the organization as an assistant professor. I'm pretty sure the full professors have something like a whole different other thing. Okay. So now we're going to talk about subfolders. Okay, so I have advice here that says more subfolders. Just create more subfolders. Don't be afraid of that. All right. And what I find helps is that when it comes to, as you can see, funded projects, invited talks, I put dates there so that the folders can show up in chronological order. So I use YYMMDD format for the date. So if you start with the year, then the month, and then the day, like they do over like internationally, that helps to keep everything chronological. And as you can see, let's work our way from left to right. Funded projects. So you'll see here the date for any one of these funded projects corresponds to the actual start date of the project or the start month. Okay. Also, this helps me to prioritize like what's due. So as you can see, there's an NIH grant that was funded like a year and a half ago that will probably require some sort of annual review more readily than, say, the Spaces grant. So the awesome part about this and having, and what you see next to the date is actually the sponsor. So I use date and sponsor. And if there are multiple grants from the same sponsor, you'll see that I'll delineate that by PM regime or TAP or whatever. I do have a folder under funded projects for my balance sheets. So if I download the expenditures, I actually just put it in one folder because the expenditures, at least through UC Berkeley, are for every project comes in the same spreadsheet. So what I tend to do is I have a proposals folder that I don't have here, and I organize it the same way, except there's no date. There's just the sponsor. And so if that proposal is funded, then I just drag the proposal folder to funded projects, put the start date, and then I move all of that material to a folder called proposal. And so I keep the proposal materials in the same folder as the project management materials, because I can't tell you how often I have to go back and read and get stuff from the original budget and the original proposal. Like, I'm constantly accessing the materials from the proposal throughout the project. So that's how that's managed. And I'm being transparent here because everything you see here is on my public CV. Teaching. I have a folder for seminars. I have a folder for like unaccounted for teaching. Like, you can see GRFP prep. If I'm doing a workshop for my students, I'll keep that under teaching, etc. And then in each one of those course folders, I have the date or the term. And so the terms have a subfolder because every term that you teach it, you have a different roster, you change the materials. And so even though the slides may not change year to year, which mine do, I have a copy of that for every term so that you can just separate what you've done year to year. So that's teaching. And then invited talks, I also like to organize chronologically, like you can see there on the right, because this is also helpful for keeping my CV organized, as well as help me when it's time to do the merit reviews. Because if I've been organized with all of my invited talks, I can just go to my folders and be like, yeah, I did this, then that, blah, blah, blah. You know, I can, it's just easier for me. And we all know what goes in there. All right, so this is just a preview of how I organize my files. And this is a Mac operating system file display. I like Finder. It's really convenient. And so that's another reason why I like the Mac operating system. All right. And so last but not least is my feedback about file management in regard to your desktop. Please, 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 if you are saving things to your desktop, please stop. Please stop that. Stop. I say that because back in the day when I was using a virtual machine at Georgia Tech, I think every night they would wipe the virtual desktops. So if, let's say you have a virtual desktop running and then your connection is closed and you've saved everything to a desktop, a virtual machine desktop, your stuff's gone. Not that you have a virtual desktop with your own personal computer, but I just find that it's not good practice to keep all your stuff on your desktop, because when you open your desktop and you see all that chaos, you get overwhelmed, you can't find anything, and it's just messy. All right, so make use of your documents partition subfolder on your computer, and then begin to create your subfolders and your folders to help you manage. Because when you're in a meeting and you need to show someone something really quickly, you need to be able to access your stuff in a timely manner, and you're not like looking through your desktop. It's just bad. And no, I'm not being sponsored by Samsung, but that's a picture of a portable hard drive if you need to have more space available to you for file management. So please, please, please stop doing that. That is all I have for file management and technology. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about your best practices. I would love to know. And if there are any professors listening, can you let me know what your students or what you're asking your students to do? That would be great. Because it is not always intuitive for us on the STEM side, not the computer side, but us in the sciences and like the more public facing engineering. We don't really think about things like this. Thank you. Let's go ahead and remove that. All right. The next part of office hour, which will take us to 4 o'clock, is answering some of the questions in the form. The Google form for question requests is available in the description box. So there is a question here that says, in the last office hour, you talked about undergraduate researching and the prospects and I'm so sorry. You talked about undergrads researching the prospective website to learn more about their research. So I did talk about how if undergrads are interested in research, that they should look at the faculty members' web pages. The question is, can you discuss online branding and what platforms people should use, when people should start making their own website, and what actually gets posted, shared, to maintain, I guess, privacy concerns, and, how much is too much? I thought this was a good question. So, yeah, if an undergrad wants to reach out to you and learn more about your research, it is good to have an online presence. And most faculty members have an online presence. But to get at the part of this in regard to when you should start making content for your online presence, my recommendation is for graduate students at the tail end of their programs to start thinking about online presence, specifically like when you're trying to go on the job market. I think before then, you can just create your Twitter to just read about the goings on in the community. So let me back up. So as a graduate student, or even as an undergrad, the first thing I recommend you do is to create your LinkedIn profile. This is really helpful. Put your educational material and your internships, projects. That's something that you can do readily and people can get to know you in the field. And it's a professional platform that can get you used to engaging online. The closer you get to looking for full-time employment, permanent employment, you'll need to beef up your LinkedIn, etc. Now, if you're not going into industry after undergrad and you're going into grad school, grad students should also keep their LinkedIn pretty updated. That's where you can post your papers and you can interact professionally with people. And like I said, you can create a Twitter. And if you already had social media as a grad student and it's not an anonymous account and it's full of like offensive stuff, you want to delete that. Okay? There's a way to separate, forgive me, church and state when you're online as a researcher. You want to think about how anybody that's reading your tweets could potentially bring that on to you as like a Title IX issue or a harassment issue or an offensive type thing. And so you'll want your Twitter to reflect like a semi-professional presence. Some people like to post personal things, and I'm fine with that. If you want to bring more of your personal side to your Twitter account, that's fine too. I think it's good to show that we're human. My it's up to you. But I would say, start cleaning up your online image. If you are posting things that are just wildly offensive, they're against Title IX, things like that. Now, that's your LinkedIn, that's your Twitter. Of course, you can do the other platforms, etc. The other thing is when you're close to graduating with your PhD and it's time for you to develop your online presence so that you can get an academic job, a postdoc, or a national lab job. Even before you make your website in your third, fourth, or fifth year, you should create a Google Scholar profile, especially if you have a conference presentation, because AGU and a couple others will record your presentation in Google Scholar. It shows up there. And also, if you've published, that will also obviously be showing up in your Google Scholar profile. So you'll want to do that as soon as you have citable or recordable products, even before your website. It's easy. People can connect your face to your name and they can look at your research productivity. It's pretty low effort too. You just have to authenticate your email. Then I'll say you should be working on your own personal website. If you're toward the end of your PhD and you're trying to get on the job market. So for those of you that may be like feeling this is too much work, I don't have time for this, you can outsource it on Fiverr. No, Fiverr is not supporting or sponsoring me, but I've heard that outsourcing on Fiverr, Fiverr, is pretty inexpensive. But for those of you that do want to just manage your own website, get a free platform. I would recommend that if you're resource limited, just do a free platform like WordPress or even Google Sites, I think. I bought my domain when I became a professor. Before then, when I became a professor, I bought ivylab.com. Before then, I don't think I didn't buy the domain. Domains cost like $112 a year. But you can do this for free. And for those of you that don't have the time to put all that effort into your website, you really only need 3 pages. I recommend that you have the CV About Me page. So just the overview of who you are professionally. Have a research page, number 2, that has abstracts, links to your papers, just an overall profile of your research productivity, however you want to do it. And then your third page can be your teaching, service, and interests. So the rest of the stuff that let potential employers know about your teaching experience, your volunteerism, and things like that. So About Me, your CV, your research profile, and then your teaching and service. You can also combine that into one if it's one of those websites that just has the functionality where you're just scrolling through and each section highlights itself. That's fine. But really, the only content you need is a little blurb about yourself, your CV, highlight your research in the form of abstracts, links to papers, links to video recordings, and then your teaching and service. Branding. Branding. I talked about branding in the faculty position series. So for people that are starting labs, it's time to brand. And that's in the form of naming your lab. Like, what's your lab's name? Is it the last name lab? Or is it the multi-phase chemistry lab? You know what I'm saying? And most people that I've seen get jobs lately have a little logo associated with their lab, and you can generate your own logo through various websites, or once again, you can go to Fiverr and outsource that and they'll make you a logo. Concerns about privacy. Like, that's up to you about how much you want to share. literally the only thing that people will know is what you tell them. And if something gets on the internet that you are not happy with, get it removed. Yeah. Okay. I'm actually going to do more content on branding and social media, and I'll do maybe a 10-minute academic enrichment video about that. The next question that I'll end the live with is, as an early career researcher, my papers keep getting rejected despite receiving generally positive feedback from reviewers. How do you recommend we go about this part of research? When we submit a paper, should our expectation be for it to get rejected and any other outcome to be a pleasant surprise? What's the average reject rate amongst that I've experienced or I've seen? Okay, so we're talking about papers and rejections and things like that. Just my blanket advice here is just run your paper by a trusted advisor that is successful in publishing in that journal. That's it. Ask so-and-so who used to be the editor of the journal, hey, is this XYZ journal quality? If they say no, then you can likely bet it's going to get rejected. How do I feel about these standards? That's a different video. But if you really want to know if your paper is going to get rejected, just ask the person that publishes there a lot or someone that has been an associate editor if it's okay. If they tell you it's not up to par, maybe take their advice and modify your paper accordingly. I had the pleasant experience of just having my graduate papers just published, right away with not a whole lot of obstacle, because my advisor was an associate editor for a really prestigious journal in my field. And so he wouldn't let me submit things that were low quality. Also, we also made responsible decisions about what journal we were targeting. And so I'm going to do an aside real quick to talk about targeting different journals. We have to be extremely honest with ourselves about the quality of our papers and where we think they should go and fit. I personally try to match the work thematically with the journal. So although I would love to publish in Nature and Science and all that all the time, thematically, it's probably not relevant to Nature and Science. So Nature, Science, those are broad appeal journals. They're going to appeal to more than just your niche field. And right now my work is way too niche and pilot scale and new to go to a big journal like that. And so if you are targeting the journals thematically and you're being honest about the rigor, the quality of the work, then you should end up with a not so traumatic review. So a little bit of an under the hood moment. For those of us in the social justice, environmental justice space, it is a little bit weird right now because there is this kind of contention between traditional research and community engaged, community facing research at the moment. And so I've tweeted about this before, where I've read where pretty established researchers were getting really nasty comments about social justice work in the big name journals, right? And it's really side eye. So the best practices right now for submitting community engaged research that is relevant to engineering but may contain more qualitative data, you have to be really careful and strategic about where you're submitting that type of work to. just in all honesty, I would never submit my community engaged work to some of these really highly technical journals because I don't think they'll be well received. Yeah, I just recently heard that like a journal like ES&T is going to reject 75% of papers. So you have to like take that into consideration. I think there is a database online that tells you the submission rate and the acceptance rate. So I'll do some research, and if that website is what I think it is, I will link it below to show you guys how to figure out the acceptance rate for these journals. I think that's all I have to say about papers and rejections. Is being really honest. Also, the further along in this field or in your career you get a gut feeling about your papers. You know where they should be. You know, you have a gut feeling about whether the idea is novel and broad appeal enough to be in a Nature paper, and you should just be honest with yourself. And every time I've had a nagging feeling about a paper, it reflects what happens in peer review. I've only been caught off guard one time. But the other times, yeah, the reviewers were correct. Thank you to the people that are reviewing my papers. I appreciate your advice. I think that's all I have to say today. Okay. I don't see any questions online. I will refresh the form to see if anyone else has submitted a question midstream. If not, thank you very much for attending this office hour. I will see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your July. And this has been Dr. Sunshine with Under the Hood Office Hours.